Sheriff's Department is, it's the oldest institution of law enforcement in the United States. So we get a level of respect as it relates to dealing with the community. I have a unit that focuses on community engagement and the Sheriff's Office engagement with the community. The Sheriff's Office goes out into the various neighborhoods and talk to people about how they can help us and how they can help each other, how they can be their brother's keeper.
Love you, baby.
Love you too.
All right. You need to recap.
I will.
When Paula Dans was elected sheriff in late 2018, she made history.
In front of hundreds on Monday, Paula Dans became the new sheriff of Pitt County. But more significantly, she became the first African-American woman in our state to hold the position and just the 5th in the country.
But she wasn't the only big change in leadership.
Wake, Durham, Cumberland, Mecklenburg, Buncombe, Forsyth, and Guilford all elected African-American sheriffs.
6 of the 8 counties had black sheriffs for the first time. The face of the sheriff in North Carolina changed overnight. And in some of these counties, the sheriff had held his position for more than a decade. Don Blagrove, executive director of the Carolina Justice Policy Center, says it was about time for a change.
What we've seen is that there are lots of people in North Carolina who are ready to see us shift away from the traditional model of law enforcement and move towards something more progressive that's holistically better for the community.
There are things that the sheriff, and only the sheriff, can handle. The detention center, I am solely in charge of the detention center, how that facility is run. And that's my biggest liability when we're talking about being a sheriff. That detention center will always be the biggest liability.
Sheriff Dans has seen a lot of changes and increases in the jail population in the almost 30 years she has worked in law enforcement.
Back in the day when I was on patrol, we used to have a mental health system in Pitt County. So when I would go on a call and I recognized that this was a mental health issue, I could take them to mental health. And then they would get them squared away. Today, we don't have anywhere to take them. We don't have that mental health system. And where do we take them? We take them to jail. And that is the worst place for them.
There's an old saying, if we always do what we've always done, we'll always get what we've always got. And Sheriff Dans, she recognizes that. So she has the ability to step back and look at all sides. She's not confined to maybe a traditional view.
When you talk about people being in jail, other than the mentally ill, the 2 root causes are drugs or poverty. People can't get good jobs, maybe because they don't have skills in vocational areas across the country. One of the biggest things is opioids and heroin addiction. People will do a lot of things to get their fix. And usually it's low-level crime, stealing or prostitution or some of those things that ends up getting them in trouble with the law. And so they end up in our detention center. And then they get out, and then they go back. So those are the 2 things that I focused on when I immediately came in. And so now I have created a program called SHARP, Sheriff's Heroin Addiction Recovery Program.
I'm Leonida Inge, and I'm a public radio reporter at WUNC. Someone, have you been in jail before? Have you been here before?
Been in and out of jail my whole life, more times than I can count.
After my mom died, I started using cocaine heavy and other hard drugs like meth, Molly, take any pill he would give me.
I was addicted to heroin for almost 10 years. I started out using pain medication from the VA hospital. Didn't know what opiate addiction was. And here I am.
We try and keep it around 10 to 12 inmates because we want them to develop a community with them amongst themselves. People are treated like people and not just like a bunch of animals crammed into one space. It makes a huge difference on their morale and the choices that they make.
I like the program, it's voluntary. You know, the judge is not making us come in here, we're coming in here on our own. It makes a difference. When you're doing it for yourself than somebody else.
We learn something new every day. When we got one class that come in and teaches us about like what we're gonna do when we go back out there and trying to cope with it.
We have a professor from East Carolina University who teaches life skill courses. We have licensed therapists. They do substance abuse counseling, mental health counseling, peer support specialists who may have gone through recovery or treatment themselves. We have the chaplains that come and provide prayer services for the ones that would like that.
I want to hit it from the spiritual aspect, because for some people, it's their belief in a higher power that gets them out of the hole that they're in.
I've learned to meditate, some breathing, some anger management skills, mindfulness, get things rolling in the right direction for when I get out.
I go to court this month. I'm gonna talk to my lawyer about extending my case so I can stay and complete this.
Definitely not a normal thing. No one says, I want to stay in jail, but they want to stay in jail to complete this program because it's helpful to them. They see where it's going to change their lives.
For those inmates who can't be a part of the SHARP program, there is still help through the Jail Navigator.
A jail navigator navigates or guides one through the process of the criminal justice system, just navigate them safely through from intake all the way through release to eliminate a long stay at the jail. It takes a whole village to, help these mental health persons and substance using folks. It really does.
Help can come in many different forms. It can come in enforcing the law, or it can come from giving resources to those who are underserved, underprivileged in situations that they have a dependency on things that keeps them coming into our detention center. I have a vested interest in this being the best community and the safest community that it can be. And safety doesn't always come with handcuffs. As I started the SHARP program and started talking about initiatives to help people stay out of jail, you're gonna have that few group of people that says, we don't want our tax monies going to that. Why should we pay? That's just their problem, that's just their fault. What they're not recognizing is it costs more to keep them in jail. When you're talking about a medical contract that is millions of dollars, because I have to provide medical care. People who go into the hospital, pregnant people who come into the jail who has to go to the hospital. That bill is on me and on the citizens of this county. You have to feed them 3 meals a day. You have to clothe them. You have to provide heat and air. So you gotta pay the light bill. So the cost of keeping people in jail is significantly more than having them out of jail. When they're out of jail, if they're working, spending money in the store and paying the taxes. That comes back to the community. That gives the community an ability to make our county more appealing to businesses that may want to come in here and then hire more people. So for me, the advantage is keeping them out.
One controversial topic that North Carolina sheriffs are dealing with is immigration. Most of the black sheriffs who won office in 2018 ran on a platform of not working with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. Sheriff Dance says she will honor requests from ICE to detain some prisoners, but will not work with them more closely than that.
If they commit a crime and they go into my detention center, I'm going to call ICE. I will not be a part of the 287G because the 287G targets a specific group of people. I'm not having it here in Pitt County. And to be honest with you, I, would be afraid that I'd have officers who would just go after people who are brown. And I don't want to put them in that position because the 287G gives you the authority to ask people for their documentation to see if they are here legally. And it's not my job. We have enough crime. We have enough other things that we attend to than doing the job of ICE.
Some people may question whether a woman can be an effective sheriff, but Dan says being a woman can be an advantage.
Well, being a woman, naturally, we can be somewhat more compassionate. You know, sometimes men tend to say, oh, they're emotional, and there's a difference between being emotional and compassion. I think everybody ought to have some compassion, some empathy. But for women, we have this maternalistic instinct somewhere in the pit of our soul that will afford us the desire to give that particular call or situation an extra 30 seconds because things may not seem the way that they are or that we perceive it. So I think that has been to my advantage.
Sheriff Dance is one of only a handful of sheriffs who are both a woman and African American. As a person of African descent in this country, she is well aware of the racial disparities that exist in jails and prisons.
What you see in most detention centers around the country has been African American people, Black people.
What about your jail here?
It's probably the same.
Majority Black?
And so, because I am a Black woman or a Black person, it affects me because, in a sense, that's my community. Now, don't get it twisted. I'm going to enforce the law. You commit a crime, I don't care what color you are. But because it affects me as being a Black person, it gives me a desire to make an impact in changing the narrative of what's been for so long. I know it can happen because I did it because I changed the face of law enforcement in Pitt County, in North Carolina.
Jail populations have been steadily growing across the country, particularly in small towns and rural areas. If, as a society, we're going to reduce mass incarceration in jails, then the people we elect as our sheriffs, our keepers of the jails, will need to be an integral part of the solution.
I just think that in order to affect change, we must be a part of that system that affects change in the actions and not just words. It's very easy to sit back and talk about what's wrong and complain about it. But you know, if you really want to affect that change, you gotta get in there and be the change you want to see.